All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I know most of you have heard my welcome spiel a few times now, so I won't repeat everything, but I do want to thank you all for joining us virtually tonight. This is the Parkland Community Trail webinar. We had hoped, of course, to be meeting in person around this time in our project, but unfortunately, the stars did not align for us, and we had to get creative about finding another way to get out, get information out to people and be able to get some questions answered. So here we are. I'll start with a brief introduction of our team, and then I'll walk through the agenda and some logistics, and then we'll dive into the presentation. So my name is Brianne Blackburn, and I'm a trail coordinator with Pierce County Parks. And our department is the department leading this project for the county. I'll first introduce a member of our project team and my co-presenter tonight, Brandon Gonzalez with Alta Planning and Design.
Hi, everybody. Brandon Gonzalez, Alta Planning and Design. I've been serving as the project manager for the Parkland Neighborhood Trail.
All right. I'd also like to acknowledge the other members of our team who are not on camera tonight, but will be supporting us on the back end with logistics and questions and other things that happen in a virtual presentation. Cindy Haverkamp, my colleague with Pierce County Park, Elena Lynn and Harrison Price with Enviro Issues, who have been supporting the Parkland Community Trail Design Project with community engagement. After we get oriented here with the housekeeping items, we'll roll into about a 20-minute presentation on the project design and where we're headed. And at about 6 p.m., we'll move into questions and answer period before we wrap up and talk next steps just before 6:30. Please note that we have muted mics and disabled all audience chat. With the number of people potentially joining us, it'd be difficult to manage these interactive components. So if you do have questions, please send those to us through the question and answer function you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll respond. If it's a general question, we'll be able to respond during question and answer. If it's something specific, like a technical issue, our team on the back end will message you directly and try to help you answer those questions. You'll see up in the corner of the screen that this meeting is being recorded. We are planning to post the recording on our project website to make it available for people who couldn't join us tonight. None of your personal information will be included in that recording. We have some questions that were submitted ahead of this meeting, and our offline team members will be tracking questions submitted live through question and answer. We'll do that towards the second half of the meeting. If we get a significant number of really specific property type questions, we will plan to hold those till the very end and to give people an opportunity to opt into that portion of the meeting or take off. So with that, I will turn it over to Brandon with Alta Planning and Design to walk us through where we're at with the project design and hopefully answer many questions about where we're going.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brandon. Welcome everybody. Like I said, we know that this is a little bit different situation and circumstances than what we were originally planning and hoping for. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Before we get started and just kind of the technical pieces or just kind of diving into the concept a bit, just wanted to address a few questions. Why a webinar, why you were invited, and kind of what we're covering today and what we're hoping to kind of to let you kind of see where the progress. So why a webinar? Brianne has already addressed this, but if you were at our February open house, one of the things that we were really hoping to do was some targeted neighborhood meetings where we mentioned kind of going to a coffee shop or kind of small groups and trying to go through once we got to the concept design. So we obviously, that was before COVID, before we really got into a lot of the social distancing measures. So we're hoping to still give you a lot of really good information to let you know about the progress that we're making and just to kind of really share information with you today. The reason why most of you were invited is we really wanted to reach out to people first and foremost who live next to the trail. And so if you received a postcard in the mail, it's because we identified you as just being somebody that lives adjacent to the trail. But we also reached out to anybody who's like in a previous stage has expressed a desire to kind of stay in the loop on the project. So we reached out to you to let you know about this meeting. And then there might be a few of you also that, you know, for word of mouth or your neighbors kind of passed on the information. We're glad that you're also here, here too. So great group, hopefully, of different, you know, people that represent Parkland. And like I said, we just want to take some time to go through where we're at with the concept. So what I really wanted to do real quick is just give a little bit of background especially for those that might be joining us for the first time. So the Parkland Trail really started as a concept in the Parkland Midland Spanaway Comprehensive Plan. It was sort of a regional kind of trail potential, you know, connectivity option. And so Pierce County submitted for and applied for grant funding for the design of the trail. And so what we're going through right now is thinking about the design of a specific segment of this kind of regional trail. And think about the segment as being roughly between Pacific Lutheran University and Heathley Middle School on the north, down to about Sprinker Recreation Center on the south. So that's really the segment of the trail that we've been focusing on for this particular design project. And if you think about just the neighborhood that kind of spans between Pacific Lutheran University down to Sprinker Rec Center, there's a lot of really neat features. We have several different schools. So we think about this trail as an opportunity for safe routes to schools. We have numerous parks, the Recreation Center, you know, Breesman Forest, Gagne Park, and others. And so this is a great kind of recreational trail opportunity that connects some of those different features. And then when you think about it a little bit as a regional connection, from where we're currently showing the trail to end near Sprinker Rec Center, there's a facility along Military Road that can allow users to go farther south into Spanaway Park and Endpoint South. So that's really when we're thinking about the opportunities of this trail within kind of that context. And this specific project, really what we're tasked with doing is identifying a preferred option for where the trail could go. So this means looking at different alternatives, different options, different road alignments where we could potentially run this trail, and then identifying the pros and cons, selecting one that we really feel has the best opportunity and has the fewest amount of impacts, and then developing a concept for what that trail could look like. So think about it pretty high level at this point. And as part of all of those efforts, we've been doing a lot of neighborhood engagement. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at some of these different, or engage with us at some of these different formats. We have the project website, which is specifically just for information on this project. Previously, there was an interactive web map for you to give us some comments and feedback on it. Pierce County sent out, I think, 4,000 postcards for our public meeting back in February. We had that public meeting, and then we've also done some engagement at some neighborhood events. So we've really been trying to get word out about this trail so that you have the information you need to be able to plug in, let us know kind of your thoughts. So before I dive into a couple areas along the trail, one of the first questions is probably what are we talking about when we say, the Parkland Trail? And I think that this image kind of nicely shows what we're generally talking about when we say the Parkland Trail. You can see that this runs through a neighborhood. There's not sidewalks on the other side of the street, so this neighborhood really hasn't had a lot of sidewalks. This is probably about a 12-foot trail, which is roughly about what we're looking at for Parkland. So think about the width of this, and this is roughly what we're thinking about. And then something I want to call your attention to is that there's a little bit of a space I'm going to show on here between the trail and the roadway. And that's probably about 2 feet or so. What we're wanting to do with the Parkland Trail is have about 4 feet of separation between the trail and between the roadway. And I think why that's really important to point out is that we're thinking about safety of users and safety of people that are going to be, using the trail to walk to school or other things. And so we're really trying to design with safety in mind and provide that space between the trail and the roadway. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about. And then thinking about the concept, the trail concept, what does that mean? And so you can see, this is just an image that I pulled from our trail concept, basically at the north end of 8th Avenue. And what we're doing is think about it from a high level of what are the characteristics of the trail? What are some of the opportunities for landscaping or for some design features? If we're talking about a 12-foot trail, does it even work? Does it fit within the county's right-of-way, which is where the street, the county-owned right-of-way where the streets go? And so we're trying to dive into some of the issues, figure out if it works, opportunities, constraints, and then also trying to figure out if there's a constraint in a particular area, what are some options that we have to look at? Thinking about preserving trees and other elements that are, really important to the neighborhood, and trying to figure out how we can best do that. So those are kind of what we're doing in a concept design. And just for clarification, it is not an engineering design yet. That's the next phase. So that's really where we get into like the actual details. So with that background, I really wanted to focus on 3 specific areas of the trail to kind of walk through. The first is a northern alignment. The second one will be 135th between 8th and Yakima. And then the third focus area is going to be the southern extent, kind of around Sprinker. So starting off with the northern alignment, this has been an area that you've probably noticed if you've looked at the concept. We're currently showing it end at 129th. And we're intentionally doing that for now because anything roughly north of Tule Lake Road, we're having some really great discussions with Pacific Lutheran University and the school districts about how we can get the trail from roughly the crossing at Tule Lake Road up to Keithley Middle School. And coincidentally, the Pierce County Public Works is also working on a sewer main project that is roughly in the same area of where we want the trail to go. It's a great opportunity for us to think about the best location for that sewer main and also for the trail, because with the sewer main, they're going to do an easement, which essentially lets Pierce County have rights to operating the sewer main maintenance. And in that easement, we could also put the trail. And so it's not shown in the concept at this point, but we're still having some really great conversations and making great progress on what that's going to look like. And kind of, this is something that's probably more familiar to you from the concept design is, again, it ending on 129th. The yellow dashed line is sort of that area that we're still kind of negotiating and talking a little bit about. It's an area that honestly, most of you probably already know, whether it's official or not. It's kind of become an open space area. People are using it, walking through this area, using it for Frisbee golf and for walking their dogs. And so we're really thinking about a trail that can kind of formalize that a little bit more. But one of the main questions that we would love to kind of get feedback from anybody who lives on 129th is whether or not when that trail does kind of go north of 129th, whether or not you want some sort of a connection from the street over to the trail at this location. So even if it's not a 12-foot kind of big trail that comes into 129th, if it's a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk that has a connection over there, we would love to hear your thoughts on that. That's obviously what we're kind of showing, but we really would love to hear from you on that idea. Moving down to the second focus area, which is around 135th Street. So as part of, we mentioned we were doing a lot of evaluation or evaluating alternatives. So we know that we had to get from 8th Avenue over to Yakima at some point. The reason being is that Yakima is the best connection down to Sprinker Rec Center. So that's always been a part of kind of the concept alternative. It was more of just figuring out which street makes the most sense and why. So we literally looked at a lot of the different street alternatives, thought about what are the pros and cons of choosing this particular street. And for a lot of different reasons, we really have focused in on 135th Street. And this was also something that we brought up in the public meeting and provided, back in February, and provided 135th and 137th as 2 different alternatives. And for a couple of different reasons, we also got that feedback and landed on 135th. So when we're thinking about, the context of 135th, this is the one area where there's a lot of driveways that front the street. So let me give you a little bit of an idea of what that kind of looks like. So this is a photo from a similar type environment. There's a residential neighborhood running up and down here, you can see that there's driveways spaced, along the trail. Just note too that this is probably about a 16-foot trail. So this is about 4 feet wider than what we're talking about with Parkland, but it still gives you a good idea. So just think about it as it's a wider sidewalk that would essentially be running in front of your home. You'd be looking a little bit more into seeing, if there's a user that's coming by the trail. But the same thing it goes for the users, is that as they're using the trail, they are also keeping their eye out for, anybody that's crossing the trail into their driveway. So that just hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of how this kind of looks. I would say, just to be transparent and honest, that I think that the biggest impact that we would see on 135th would be the loss of the on-street parking on the south side of the road. If you're familiar with 135th, there's kind of the gravel shoulder on the south side, and there's a little bit of parking on that shoulder. That area would go away for the trail, but right now we're thinking that the northern side of the street would still remain open for on-street parking. So I think that would be realistically one of the biggest impacts. And then just something else just to note about the overall project in general, and it applies to 135th, is that one of the goals of this project is really to design within the existing right-of-way. So we really wanted to make sure that whatever we're doing with this trail is going to fit within the right-of-way whenever possible. And so that's been something that, we've been trying to really design for.
I just want to jump in here with a quick reminder to folks. A couple of things. One, if you haven't taken a look at the design, the concept that Brandon's talking about, it is on our project website right now, and that we should have those links in our emails that you got for this presentation. You can also just Google Parkland Community Trail, and it'll get you to our Parks and Rec website. And then also just remember, we are collecting questions for the end. So there's a question and answer function on the bottom, and you're welcome to type those in at any point. Yep.
Thanks for jumping in on that. That's as we go through this, I know that this is a lot of information to kind of throw at you in 20 minutes, but the concept is up on the website, and so we really encourage you to look at that. And then as I finish up with the remaining slides, definitely ping us if you have any questions, and we'll try to get to those. So thanks, Brianne. So moving on to kind of the southern the southern segment of the trail. This is similar to 129th, where if you've looked at the concept that's up on the website, you see our design ending roughly around 144th as it hits Sprinker Rec Center. And the reason why we're currently ending that kind of concept design, or the design that you see there, is because there's ongoing planning work happening at Sprinker Recreation Center right now. They're essentially updating their master plan for a lot of the outdoor recreation facilities that are on campus. And so as part of that effort, they're really thinking about and looking at this last segment of the Parkland Trail between in the boundaries of Sprinker. But roughly, we think that the trail will run along the border between Breezeman Forest and Sprinker Rec Center. And it'll end down towards at the parking lot. And I think one of the main conversations that we've been having, or that they've been having around kind of the trail through Sprinker, is that currently Sprinker closes its campus during after hours. So this is obviously something that we want to think about in relation to the trail, because it's always great to have that public access maintained to the trail, particularly between that last segment of 144th down to the Sprinker Rec Center parking lot. So those conversations are still ongoing. I know they've been having some really positive conversations around that. But that is also why we've left that last segment out from our design. But zooming in now just to that final piece, that final segment, I just want to point out a few things. So roughly where the arrow is the property line for Sprinker. And so I think it's been within the past 2 to 3 years or so, there's been a new fence that's been put up there at the Sprinker boundary. That would be removed to make way for the trail. So we would be looking at opening up this piece of right-of-way into Sprinker, essentially, to follow the trail. And we've had some good conversations with some neighbors in this area about that, acknowledging that it has been something that has been brought up as a concern, thinking about what happens if we do open that area up. And I just would say that, with a trail comes users and comes increased visibility on the trail. And so we think that with that increased visibility, there'd be the opportunity to at least alleviate some of the concerns for the activities that, people have been responding to kind of in Breezeman and in this particular area. So just want to acknowledge that we have heard that and have been discussing that with some neighbors in this area. To an opportunity that I think we're looking into a bit is, the water district property is really kind of at this southern segment. And if you drive along Yakima, it seems like there's a very, very wide road, especially on the west side between the edge of the street and over towards where the water district's fence is. Some of that is in the right of way, a good chunk of it is, but then there's actually a pretty decent setback from the water district over to the fence. And so we're thinking about this at least as some sort of a design opportunity that we could, potentially explore a little bit more, keeping that natural kind of feel of this area that's a little bit different from other portions of the trail, and having a little bit more room for some sort of, landscaping and design at this location. So also wanted to kind of point that out. And one last thing just to mention on this sheet is, we're hopeful that with the trail going through Sprinker, it will remain open to the public. But in a worst case type of scenario where it is closed off after hours, trail users would essentially be hitting this dead end and would have to use 144th to go over to C Street where there's a facility. Again, we're hoping that that's not the case and good conversations are happening around that, but that would be kind of an alternative that would happen if we do have to close things off. And just one last piece that I wanted to cover a little bit is thinking about our crossings. There's two major arterials that the Parkland Trail, this section of it would be crossing. One of them is obviously on Tule Lake Road, which is high speed, high traffic. And then the other one is on 138th Street. And unfortunately, right at 138th in Yakima, where our proposed crossing is, there was a pedestrian fatality, I think back in November or December. And so it just kind of raises the importance for having these types of safe crossings at these locations, particularly if we want to make them safe for all users. So at these particular locations, what we're showing is an RRFB. It's this picture that's kind of up on the screen. And just showing you an example of what that is. You may be familiar with it, where if you're walking or strolling, biking, you walk up to it, you hit a button, the lights start flashing, traffic stops to yield to you, you cross the street, and then the lights go off and traffic kind of goes back. So that's what we're proposing, at least in concept, for these two locations to make it safe, in addition to some other kind of design enhancements that we can do to make it really visible and have traffic just naturally slow down as they approach these two stops. So in kind of closing of the presentation, I wanted just to hit a couple of our next steps and just cover where we're at. So right now we're finishing up the concept design. The draft that you see, we're continuing to work on, finesse, finalize. So that's an ongoing work. And then there's going to be a design report that's going to go along with the trail. It's going to give a little bit more of the background, the context, the rationale for some of our alternatives, and why we really chose this route. And then we're still working on it. We wanted to have a really fun, great celebration at the end of the project, and we're working on how to do that virtually. So stay tuned. We'll have more information on that. And that's really going to wrap up this first stage of our project. From then, it's going to move into preliminary and final design, which is another opportunity for engagement and input. But that's where we really start to transition into some of the engineering and the details. And so Pierce County will be continuing with that, hoping to have that wrapped up by 2021. And then basically then we look at construction. So construction would begin in 2022, and that's can be an extensive process, but that's kind of the steps forward. So with that presentation and just a little bit, hopefully that gives you a little background. I know that's a lot of information, particularly if you're joining us for the first time. We're going to do some Q&A, but we're also genuinely available for any questions, comments, anything that you want to share with us. That's why we're reaching out. As everybody mentioned, we're going to have a lot of this information posted on the website. along with some of the responses to our questions, and any questions that we don't get a chance to answer, we'll try to address those and get those up on the website. So with that, we will start to look at some of your questions and comments.
Okay, it looks like first up, we've got a batch of questions related to safety on the trail, which Brandon, I'll leave for you to address. But really looking at what can be done to increase safety in specific areas, like where 8th turns into 132nd, where we've identified some a rest area, and looking at increasing safety overall. What impact does the trail have on pedestrian and bicycle safety in an area like Parkland?
Yeah, it's a good question. So essentially, in particular to the area where 8th Avenue turns onto 132nd, that is an area that we've identified as a great place for some sort of, benches, just kind of a little bit of a passive recreation spot for people that are using the trail, and then also a great opportunity for some signage about the trails to kind of raise its profile. So what we would be doing to think about safety in particular is, first thing that comes to mind is some bollards and some separation between the street and between that pedestrian plaza, so that if for whatever reason a vehicle is traveling north on 8th Avenue, they're maybe going a little fast, there would be some barrier that would protect anybody that is kind of at, in that area. But then I also think that as people become familiar with a trail that's running through this area, patterns are going to change a little bit. You're going to start to see more pedestrians, cyclists, people rolling, whatever it is in this area. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of an awareness shift in looking out for people. And then most importantly is at this location, we're really getting into Gates High School and then also Brookdale Elementary. So safety in general is going to be really critical at this place. And then just as a broader comment is, I think it's something that I saw as part of, I think it was the grant application that the county submitted. I believe there was somewhere around 55 collisions or incidents between a bicyclist and pedestrian or a vehicle in the Parkland neighborhood. And so to us, luckily, I don't believe any of those were fatal. But I think that just raises kind of the reason for one of the main reasons why we want this, why the county is advocating for this trail. It really does give a safe option for people who want to walk, bike, stroll, run, walk their dog, whatever it is through the neighborhood.
Yeah. And that data was from 2012 to 2016. So that 4-year period leading up to when we submitted the grant application. So as we've heard, there's been likely more collisions and some even more significant in this direct area. So I think it just kind of highlights the need for safe pedestrian and bicycle facilities in this area. Move on to the next question, and I'll take this one. I know I got this one before the meeting. We had someone ask about fencing to direct foot traffic away from private property, and that's something specifically something we look at when we're talking about where we put a trail and how we design amenities around the trail, like fencing. There's a lot of opportunity moving forward from where we are right now with this concept design, as Brandon mentioned. We'll move into a lot more of the specific details, such as where fencing might go. At this point, I don't think we're identifying any fencing in the design, but if there is a particular area where we know there's likely to be some issues, we can explore some fencing options. We have a lot of other opportunities as well, aside from fencing, to kind of direct the flow of trail traffic. And so we'll use, in places where we have space and the opportunity, we can use landscaping and other plantings to keep people kind of on the trail. And then also in areas around Parkland Prairie, connecting into those intra-park trails as well. Another question that came up, if we would have mile markers along the path. There's a lot of specific details like that are really exciting. I think those are kind of the icing on the cake as we get into the design process of getting to figure out how we can make this trail unique and how we can make it meet the needs of the community. So I think this came from someone who is interested in using the trail to run and kind of do some training. And that's something that a lot of trails incorporate and something we can do as we move forward with, we can look at as we move forward with the design.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and this is another question about safety, and it is essentially asking, you know, is there a percentage that the path would increase safety in a measurable way, be it fewer, you know, bike ped accidents, and then data. So I think that this is sort of a two-pronged approach if you think about it, because right now in Parkland, there's not a lot of sidewalks and there's not a lot of dedicated facilities. So what's sort of happening is that you have, I think probably the reason, or at least one of the reasons for some of the collision data that we have in Parkland now, is that people aren't used to looking out for these types of users, for bicyclists, pedestrians, in a designated area. Rather, it's kind of spread across the neighborhood. So that increases the likelihood of these random kind of collisions, particularly because they're not really used to looking for them. So in terms of a trail or a dedicated path, that really helps because it becomes more predictable. If you're going through Parkland neighborhood, whether you live there or whether you're passing through, the trail is something that you see. And with the trail, the signage and other design elements comes a recognition that there could be pedestrians, cyclists, and, kids walking and a lot of other things. So in that sense, it does help. The areas that we see where for concern would be kind of the crossings, because you're now funneling more people into those crossing areas. And so that's why it becomes extra critical for us to make sure that the crossings are safe, which gets back into the question or kind of the slide at the end of our presentation of showing the RFBs and other design kind of things that we can do to make those really visible for people. Let's see.
All right, I'll take one. Give Brandon a second to catch his breath. We got a question from a property owner along 8th and asking about planting a planting buffer between the trail and a fence line. And this is another. I don't know specifically about this location, but we do often consider where we have space available. How can we help make the trail experience positive for neighbors as well as people on the trail? And one of the things we'd often turn to is vegetation and landscaping, and that's a good way to provide a buffer between trail users and people's backyards or fences. So in a lot of places along the trail, you'll see, or in the concept design, you'll see kind of a green area identified adjacent to the trail. Those are areas that we've looked at that space likely exists for us to consider those options. What exactly we would put in those places, we just haven't gotten to that decision point yet. But those are the areas, and you'll see in some places it's wider, some places it's more narrow, some places it doesn't really exist, and we're having to be creative about fitting a trail in there. But there are a lot of opportunities throughout where we'll be looking at trying to incorporate landscaping to for the trail experience as well as neighborhood experience.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on that too. Is that it's sort of a puzzle if you think about it from our perspective of digging into some of the design areas like that. We know that in general, and this hopefully will help to explain even some of the areas that we're still working on at some of the conflict points. But we know that we want a 12-foot trail. We know that it's to meet our standard, we want to have 4 feet between the edge of the trail and the roadway. And then we also know that in general best practice, we want to have about 2 feet between the trail and your fence if you live adjacent to the trail. And so that's what we start with. And then we look at, you know, there's a lot of things that, like, let's just say trees and other elements that are out there that are, you know, a community benefit, and that we try to preserve those. So what we would do is we would narrow down the trail as we hit some of those places in order to preserve some of those elements. So instead of maybe a 12-foot trail, we go down to 10 foot, or we go down to 8 feet. 8 feet's not preferable, but, you know, in worst case scenarios, we can do that. Or even sometimes we can reduce the amount of design space. So that hopefully gives you just a little bit of an idea of how we approach this as sort of a puzzle, pulling it together. And what you're seeing in the concept is just that first kind of go at it, and we'll continue to refine it. One question that we did get is, will there be a dirt path adjacent to the blacktop for runners? And this kind of gets back into that question. We're really talking about a pretty narrow space for our design. And so I know exactly the type of trails that question is probably thinking about, and it's great because you can have the blacktop, you have people biking, running down it, or, you know, biking on the blacktop, and then maybe you have just that side trail for somebody just kind of, you know, jog along or just to stroll along. To be realistic about what we're dealing with, I don't think we have the room for that, or we don't have the room for that in most cases. So I don't see that as being a part of the current design of the trail.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with a next question. And this is a question about parking, which is a great question when we're talking about a trail. And would there be public parking at both ends of the trail? At this point, what we're kind of anchored on both ends of the trail by both the Sprinker rec facility, and then PLU and the Keithley Middle School and the high school to the north. We have a broader vision for more connections into the future that we'd love to explore. But for this project, that's really that corridor we're looking at. So at this point, we aren't planning on adding additional parking facilities along the route, but really looking at the existing facilities to kind of serve those needs. And then also really recognizing that this trail is a community trail where it'll serve a lot of needs for the local community. I think we'll see some broader use. Also, I think it'll be a wonderful asset to the community that people will enjoy. But I do think in a lot of cases, we'll be looking at, especially in these early phases where there isn't a strong link into like Tacoma bike infrastructure at this point. Until those connections are made, I think the parking that is existing at Sprinker and some of the other locations will serve the needs of the trail at this point.
Yeah, it looks like the question that was one of our live questions is, would it be possible to plan east-west connections that include safer routes for walking and biking to get across Pacific Avenue? And so this is a great question. And I think it kind of gets back to the concept that we were showing you to start off the slide deck, where you have the trail really connecting between north-south, between Pacific Lutheran University and down southward to Sprinker. But then if you look at the kind of the east-west connections, there's several schools, there's parks, there's the library, there's other things that are kind of farther to the east, and kind of limited on the west with Gagne Park and then some of the open space, but there are connections to the east. And we also know that there's some bus service and transit that also runs along Pacific. And so this particular project is really focused upon that north-south spine. But then what we see is additional follow-up kind of infrastructure improvements that would create linkages from the trail over to, let's say, Gates and Brookdale Elementary, or over from 8th Avenue over to Gagne, so that we kind of connect those pieces from this kind of trail spine. And then one of the neat things from design that we would be doing during that kind of next stage of design is there's a thing called wayfinding. So if you're, using a trail and you see a sign that says, 5-minute walk to to whatever it is that, you know, some attraction or something that you're going to, and it would be on the trail and point you to the direction of it from a particular cross street. And so we would want to incorporate that type of wayfinding into the trail, so that if you're using it and you want to, you know, go over towards the library, you know what street to safely do that. And that additional design projects, maybe it's adding some sidewalks, are really thinking about wanting to guide people safely on those east-west connections. So that's kind of a bigger piece of how we fit all of this together to, you know, to kind of facilitate that safe connectivity.
All right, so another question. We had a couple of, one question I think we kind of addressed with if this trail would be marketed as a community trail or kind of shooting for a broader county-wide audience. And at this point, I think the niche of this trail is really serving the needs of the Parkland community. I don't see an effort to really try to bring a lot of people out. You know, I think of like the Foothills Trail, which is kind of a recreation destination for a lot of people, given the length. You can really get some good miles in on a run or a ride if you want to make it out to Foothills. I think this serves more of the local community need and providing that safe route to community destinations. So I don't see it as being something we'd be marketing to a larger audience, but I certainly see it as a trail evolves, things do change. And then another question, just to kind of close the loop on who we've been working with some of our stakeholders, and PLU has been a great partner in our early discussions. We've got some PLU alumni on our project team, which has been fantastic. Shout out to Elena, who was recently written up in a PLU article. But we also have been working with facilities and leadership to understand kind of how this trail can work with the upcoming master planning process associated with really that area we'd be plugging the trail into, and kind of meeting lots of needs. I did get a question about if we'd been coordinating with the athletic department, which I personally haven't. I don't know if anyone on the team has found a contact with the athletic department, but I do think that's an interesting contact for us moving forward, especially as conversations with the university and looking at potential stadium development right adjacent to where we're looking at the trail. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to really partner on what that could look like and how we could serve not only the trail's needs, but also kind of capture some of the athletic department's needs as well. So interesting conversation, and that was not a direction we had really gone yet with it. So that's why we do these sorts of things and ask for your input.
Yeah. Let's see. It looks like I don't believe we've addressed this question, which was whether it can extend into North Parkland in the future. Mm-hmm. And so what we're assuming, I think, for this question, knowing kind of the general area of what's Parkland, I'm going to assume that means North Parkland is north of PLU. And so just preface it with that. This portion of the trail really gets us to PLU, but I think Bree was talking a little bit about this earlier, in that there's that regional connectivity component with new infrastructure in the future that could get up towards Tacoma, where it connects into some of their infrastructure and kind of becomes a little bit more of a regional trail. So I think that's definitely something that the comp plan, what started a lot of this, is envisioned. This is just one kind of implementation of one segment of that. So just to clarify that I do see there being an opportunity for that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other question, kind of broad question, I got a few different ways from folks is talking about wildlife in the Parkland area, and specifically looking at the Parkland Prairie area. Parks has done a lot of work restoring that prairie habitat at Parkland Prairie. And this trail will be coming through the kind of the edge of that property and crossing over Clover Creek. So once it crosses over Clover Creek, there's some more property there that Parks is that the county owns, and that we are going to look at that. And the idea is working with different organizations that have been involved with that restoration process at Parkland Prairie, and really finding ways to both accommodate the plant and animal species, significant species in that area, and trying to do some education and outreach with, what is in that area, and how our trail is accommodating that, and also looking at broader efforts to continue to improve the restoration efforts there. So we don't have any specific examples of what exactly we're going to do for a coyote that lives in Parkland Prairie, but that that is on our radar for going about the design process in a way that we really do try to factor that in and improve the natural experience of that area as well.
Yeah, it was just interesting, or it was great that we were doing some outreach with Pacific Lutheran University, and they have a class that kind of looks at watershed management. And unfortunately, with COVID, we weren't able to follow up and have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion with them. But it's pretty neat to think about just that area of the crossing of Clover Creek and some of the natural kind of enhancements and things that could be made there. And if you think about the trail, as we mentioned, most of it is within the existing right-of-way. And so it's really running right directly adjacent to a roadway. And this piece in particular is just a really nice element where, if you're walking, biking, strolling through there, you cross Clover Creek, which whenever I was out there for kind of our walkthrough, there was a lot of water running through the creek. It was beautiful. And so we really are thinking about that as being a great kind of natural element.
So it looks like at this point we've answered the questions that have come in. Just a quick reminder, we've got a couple more minutes that if you've got any burning questions, submit them to us through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And of course, if you think of something offline or would rather contact us directly, my information's up on the screen right now, and you can always find my contact information on our project website as well. So you can shoot us an email or give us a call if you have any follow-up questions. So we'll give it just a couple more minutes and see if anyone has any follow-up questions. But for now, I just really want to thank everyone for spending a bit of your evening with us. This was a fun process for us to strategize through, finding creative ways to outreach. I know everyone is in this situation with projects, and I know everyone is in a unique situation adjusting to kind of our COVID-19 lifestyle right now. But we want to keep things moving forward and are excited to keep things moving forward. So we appreciate people taking the time to plug in tonight. Looks like we've got one more question. Will there be garbage cans for dog waste? That is a great question. And one that surprisingly comes up pretty often. We are looking at citing some of those specific amenities in our park areas along the trail. Fortunately, we have a couple along the trail. So looking at the Parkland Prairie area and the Sprinker areas, where we'd really focus some of the trash can and dog waste stations. And for a couple of reasons, one of which, as Brandon mentioned, we're working with pretty limited design space along the roadway. And along the roadway isn't always a great location for garbage cans and dog waste stations for maintenance reasons as well as safety reasons for vehicles. So we do plan on incorporating those, but they'll be in specific kind of strategic locations at our park sites. All right, Brandon, any last minutes before we conclude and wrap things up?
just, I know that, just want to reiterate that I know this is a different format. This is different for all of us. This is just being transparent and open. And this is my first kind of neighborhood meeting. I love being in person with people, walking through ideas, talking about, different elements, being challenged, and just kind of working through that. So this is new for all of us. But I really just want to reiterate how much we really want your thoughts, your input. You can reach out to us with any of your comments, concerns. We're not just saying that, we genuinely mean it. So I know that you don't have an opportunity really to kind of, other than submitting questions, which thank you for doing that, don't have necessarily that in-person chance to coordinate with us, but we're available and we want to hear from you. And this is just one early stage of this overall project. So there's a lot to go. There's a lot that we'll keep refining, and then there's going to be future stages. But we literally brought you into our living rooms. So, again, just personally, thank you for being with us.
All right. Just to wrap things up, we do want you to know that we'll be compiling the questions that we have answered. And we will make them available on the project website, same place you'll be able to find this recording after the fact. And if we do get any questions after we close tonight, we'll include those as well. The recording will be up, so if you didn't get enough of us tonight and you want to rewatch it, it'll be there for you. Or if you know of any neighbors or other folks that would be interested in this, please feel free to let folks know. We hope to have all of this up there by early next week. We're shooting for May 4th, so stay tuned for that. And as Brandon mentioned, as we're moving forward, we'll be continuing with the design process. So this really is early in the project with lots of opportunity to weigh in on the design, get into the nitty-gritty details. We really look forward to doing that. That's obviously why we're in this field, but we do want your input as we move forward. So share the information and let us know your thoughts as you have them. With that, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Hopefully we didn't interrupt too many dinner plans. It's been great to hear your questions and support for the project. I got a lot of great messages from people excited about what's happening and excited to weigh in on creative ways to make this trail a Parkland trail. So we're excited to be closing in on the first big milestones for this project. This concept design will be our opportunity to really start lots of conversations with people and be able to look at what this could look like for Parkland and continue as we go. So as we move forward with this, I hate using this phrase because we've all heard it so much now, this new normal of COVID-19 life. I think we're all very acutely aware of how important it is to have access to safe ways to get outside and explore our communities without having to travel long distance. So I think this is well timed in that we all see that, and I think the benefit there is very obvious. As we do move forward with the project, please stay in touch with us via the website or email or phone calls. Not knowing how we're going to be allowed to connect with people, whether it'll continue to be virtually. This may be our format for a while with parks. Obviously, things are opening up. Our open space is opening up in waves, and you'll be seeing some of that in the Parkland area with Spanaway Lake Park opening up in May, and a few other things opening up. But just a reminder, we are still, as Pierce County Parks, we are still advocating that people use the facilities close to their residences, and recognizing that things still will be closed. So looking at playgrounds and restrooms, those are still going to be off limits, and to lower the risk of any issues associated with COVID-19. So we appreciate all your input, and we appreciate you being here with us tonight. And with that, I think we'll sign off and look forward to hopefully someday seeing all your faces in person. And if not, I'll look for emails and phone calls.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks.